I think I'll start where Frank ended, which was expressing, I think, a certain justified optimism about the position of the United States in the world today. As is so often the case, the reports of imminent American decline are greatly exaggerated. The fad of declaring American decline is perennial, or at least every decade, someone comes along and says the decline is now finally arrived. And I think the decline will someday arrive because I'm a firm believer in the theoretical principle that what goes up must come down, including great nations, but I don't think we're there yet. I think if you look at almost any traditional, even non-traditional measure of a nation's power and influence, the United States still stands apart from the rest of the nations of the world. That certainly includes what we now like to call, although I must say I'm not, with apologies to Joe Nye, I'm not thrilled with this soft power phrase. I don't quite know exactly what it means, but certainly we have benefited from the election of 2008 as a nation, not only in putting an end to an administration that was not very popular in the world, but also electing a president who really may well be the most popular person in the world right now. That's both nice, but it also potentially has some implications if it's used correctly. It's been a long time since the United States had the most popular person in the world as president. I really think it wasn't, you're all going to think it's John F. Kennedy, but I really think it's Woodrow Wilson who, when World War I ended and he traveled across the Atlantic, when he arrived in Europe, he really was the most popular man in the world, and therefore wielded a tremendous amount of influence, which allowed him to accomplish great deeds, which ultimately completely collapsed. So, to keep that in mind. But I do think that the United States has a fresh start with this new president. It has in addition to having someone who symbolizes, aside from his personal virtues, who symbolizes what America can be, which I think says a lot to the world and renews the sense of the sort of remarkable quality of the United States. Also has a very talented administration in the foreign policy realm. Vice President Biden, Secretary of State Clinton, Jim Jones, the National Security Council, Richard Holbrooke. Any one of these people could have been Secretary of State, and all of them think they are Secretary of State. So that'll be, that's interesting too. Again, when you think about the state of America right now, I would say it's hard to argue that America is in decline in the sense of relative decline, which is the only kind of decline that matters in the international system. I don't know what the current share of international GDP is, maybe Frank knows, but it's been fluctuating roughly between 20 and 24% for the last decades. I don't think it's substantially different today in terms of the share of global wealth. Obviously, as our economy is in a fall right now, but if you think in terms of relative power, whose economy is rising? In fact, a lot of the countries that we assumed were heading in the direction perhaps of overtaking the United States, or at least grabbing a bigger share in terms of their own growing economy, what we've really, the so-called BRIC countries that we've been talking about for years, I would say that the future economic well-being of some of those rising powers is very much in doubt, with Russia being the most obvious case, but I think China is at least a question mark at the moment. And if you ask who is more likely to come out of this economic crisis relatively intact, I think it's fair to say that the best bet is that the United States will come out of it first and perhaps strongest, as has happened in the past. I mean, we have a way of leading the world into, this is a diabolical plan on our part, we lead the world into recessions and depressions so that we can be the first one out and exercise our influence that way. So, but aside from that little joke, I think there's maybe some truth to that. And obviously, as Frank mentioned, military capacity remains quite extraordinary, both in budgetary terms, but also in technological terms, in which the United States continues to outpace other nations in terms of the technological developments of the weapons of war, and in this measure of great powerdom, or perhaps more accurately superpowerdom, the ability to project power around the world, the United States really is unmatched.